It is the first day of April 1922 in the small German village of Hinterkaifeck. After a frigid winter, while still cold, the promise of spring could be felt in the air. Two coffee salesmen stopped by the farm where Andreas and Cecilia Gruber live, along with their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, her two young children, 7-year-old Cecilia, named after her grandmother, 2-year-old Joseph, and a new maid, Maria Baumgartner. The salesmen knocked on the door but were disappointed when no one answered, although smoke was coming out of the chimney, and by all indications, someone should be home. The salesman went away in hopes of selling their coffee elsewhere. The next day, April 2nd, was Sunday, and the people of the small village of Hinterkaifeck were also disappointed to see that the household of Andreas and Cecilia Gruber did not make it to church. Perhaps it was just a case of springtime allergies keeping them away. Still, no reason to worry. The following day, April 3rd, young Cecilia did not make it to school. The teacher and the other young students most likely thought that whatever had kept the family from church the previous day was still ailing young Cecilia. Smoke still drifted from the chimney of their family farmhouse. All still seemed normal despite the absences. The sun gently woke the village up as it peeked over the eastern horizon on Tuesday, April 4th. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, neighbor to the Grubers, noticed that the family's mail was starting to pile up. Sensing something must be wrong, Lorenz recruited neighbors Jacob Seal and Michael Pohl to join him in investigating this situation. Finding the front door of the family farmhouse locked, the three neighbors made their way to the barn. Entering the barn, they discovered the bodies of Andreas and Cecilia Gruber, their daughter Victoria, and her daughter Cecilia. Each family member had apparently been killed by multiple blows to the head. The bodies had been stacked on top of each other and covered by a board and some hay. The neighbors found a way into the locked farmhouse through a hallway connecting the barn to the house. Once inside the house, the men found the bodies of the maid, Maria, and Victoria's 2-year-old son, Joseph. Both had been bludgeoned to death in their beds. So the story you just heard is really gruesome, really sad, and, of course, really scary. There are inconsistencies in some of the details of the story. Some places you read about it, some of the details regarding the discovery of the bodies differ. The same people are involved, but some of the finer details differ in a story that you would expect some of that from the early 20s, and especially with some of the shoddy investigation that went on in this case. So before the murders, which occurred on March the 31st, 4 days before the discovery of the bodies, strange events had occurred at the farmhouse in the months leading up to the murders. So I mentioned the fact that Among the victims was Maria Baumgartner, and she was the maid. Unfortunately for Maria, it was her very first day on the job. The family's former maid had quit the position 6 months before the murders. And the reason she gave for leaving the home was that she believed the home to be haunted. She heard she heard many times footsteps in the attic. And at times she would hear a voice and just odd noises, especially during the night. The father, Andreas Gruber, also attested to hearing what sounded like footsteps in the attic, and had investigated himself. Went up in the attic right after hearing the footsteps, only to find nothing there. He also found a newspaper in the home that the family did not subscribe to. And that was never adequately accounted for. Nobody knew where it came from, especially him. In the just days before the murders, he found fresh footprints in the snow leading to the barn, but no footprints leading away from the barn. So it sounds like whoever killed this family lived among them for months and had access not only in the house but in the barn. Apparently they were connected, as I mentioned in the intro to the video. So very creepy, very, very strange circumstances. Some other things leading up to this is, obviously I mentioned that Victoria was a widow. So her husband had allegedly died in World War I from a shell attack, but his body was never found. But nonetheless, he was mentioned among the dead in the aftermath of World War I, which was a very bloody war. However, he was allegedly seen again in World War II, which happened years after these murders took place. And he was not only seen by multiple people, but he was in a Soviet uniform. So it sounds like her husband, Carl, had defected from Germany and joined up with the Soviet Union, Russia, and apparently fought in World War II for the Soviets. Which is very interesting. But at the same time, along with other things with this story, there are inconsistencies in that. Some of the people that claim to have seen him later changed their story. But sometimes that happens. Maybe he got to them and asked them to change their story. there have been over 100 suspects for these murders. Another very sad detail, a couple of sad details that I'll tell you about. So, Joseph, the 2-year-old boy, son of Victoria, was not Carl's. The math doesn't add up for Joseph to be Carl's. Many in the village believed that Joseph was the son of Lorenz that discovered the body. Lorenz or Lorenzo, I get their names mixed up, but many believed Victoria and him to have been in a relationship, a secret relationship. But another known fact in this case is that the father I'm having to adjust a few things, and Victoria both were convicted of an incestuous relationship. Although it does sound as if Victoria was forced in the matter, both of them served time in jail. So the fact of the matter is, young Joseph was quite possibly and probably the son of an incestuous relationship between Andreas and his daughter. So a lot of strange things happened in the build-up to these murders. And I'm actually looking for a sheet of paper that'll help me out here. So, correct. I just wanted to make sure I was getting the name right. Lorenz. It's not Lorenzo, it's Lorenz. So you have incest, you have inconsistencies, you have a widow whose husband died, but maybe not. And you have apparently a killer living in the home without anyone's knowledge for months. It blows your mind away. So many strange events in this case. All of the murders took place with a pickaxe. And young, I'm going to mess this name up if I don't look at it too, Kazilia, the 7-year-old daughter of Victoria. It looks like she got the worst of all of them because she was injured. She was murdered, but she was injured and apparently lived for hours after the others had been killed. She was at the bottom of the pile of bodies that was found in the barn. And the other dead bodies were stacked on top of her living body. And upon investigation, it said that she had torn bald patches into her head where she was ripping her hair out. And it said that she died from her injuries and from shock. Before the police could even get to the scene, most of the town had shown up to the house. They cooked dinners in the kitchen. They moved the bodies a little bit, so there was no clean crime scene to investigate. Not that they had very great investigative tools back then anyway. So that just frustrated the efforts to find the true killer even more. Lorenz, the neighbor, in the version that I told, which I found on several source materials, said that obviously the front door was locked, so when he took the neighbors into the barn, he got into the farmhouse through a door connecting the barn to the house, which that door did exist. In other stories, it tells that he found the front door locked, went to the barn, and they discovered the bodies, and then went back to the front door and unlocked it with a key that he was in possession of. So that's a strange inconsistency. But I think from all intents and purposes, I think that the story that I told in the introduction is probably what happened. It wouldn't be a strange thing for them to have left a key with a neighbor, though, so it's not out of the question. Lorenz also was one of the ones that apparently moved the bodies a little bit, moved the bodies around. So that could be seen as a sign of suspicion. But he also wasn't living in the house. He was clearly a neighbor that they were well aware of. Someone was living in that house that no one could see. So out of the 100 people, and we don't have enough time to list all of the suspects, but out of the 100 people that were suspected, in my mind, there's only 2 that make any sense, and I'm going to make a leap and tell you my pick as the murderer. Lorenz and Carl, the husband of Victoria. Lorenz has a case because, like I said, he was rumored to be a lover of Victoria, and he was also rumored to be the father of Joseph. There were claims that Victoria asked for support for Joseph, financial support, that Lorenz didn't want to provide because he knew about the incestuous relationship between her and her father. And that could be a motive for murder, certainly from Lorenz, and also some of his strange behavior during the discovery phase of the bodies. Carl is also obviously a prime suspect, the husband of Victoria. Anyone who's going to fake his own death, or at least use a real disastrous situation in war to escape and never come home to his family again, and then eventually defect to the Russians, that person is obviously highly suspect, just on that merit alone. I think it's Carl. I really do. I believe that he did survive the shell attack. I believe he was haunting this family, not as a ghost, but as a living person. I believe he saw the things going on. He sounds like he was a mentally unstable individual. And I believe he killed his family. Maybe that's why Kazilia the 7-year-old Kazelia, not the grandmother, lived the longest. Maybe he couldn't finish the job in murdering the daughter that was his, because Joseph was not his. He still left her to suffer a very horrible death, but maybe he couldn't kill her himself. And that's how my mind works in this case. I believe he is the killer. Lorenz is obviously second in my mind as a suspect. So I hope not that you enjoyed this Friday vlog, but I hope that it was of some interest to you. It's obviously very mysterious. It's very creepy. And it's very interesting, and it's very sad how anyone could kill anybody, but little children. Little Joseph, 2 years old, was sleeping in his bed when he was bludgeoned to death with that pickaxe. The other family members were apparently lured to the barn. How that happened, no one really knows. But there was 4 days between the disappearance, or between the murder and the discovery of the bodies. And that's just incredible. And whoever it was that murdered him kept a fire going in the fireplace in the days after the murders. Fed the livestock. And that's creepy. That's creepy. Someone living in the house for months that no one saw murdered the family and lived amongst the dead bodies for days until the discovery. That just sends chills down my spine. Thank you for watching this episode of What's Haunting the Hearst. And I'm certain that I mispronounced many names in this. I didn't listen to any podcasts on this, although there are some. I didn't want to be influenced by other people's thoughts on it. I just wanted to read the facts on the case that were known and come to my own conclusions, and that's the conclusion I came to. So I hope you have a good weekend, and tune in next week to What's Haunting the Hearst. We're going to look at the incident. Next Friday's vlog is going to be on the Dyatlov Pass incident. It's creepy and very mysterious, and I hope you all are looking forward to it. Thank you for watching, and have a great weekend.